Hello, developers, and welcome to episode 1 of PHP Developers TV, your home for everything you need to know to be a knowledgeable PHP developer. I'm your host, as always, Scott Keck Warren. So today we're going to be talking about this article that I found on advanced value objects in PHP 8. Value objects are a really cool piece of functionality. They allow you to create a domain-specific class for different basic types that might exist within your application. For example, you might have an email class, and that value, you'll have a value object class for that, or you'll have an email value object class, and that email value object class will allow you to make sure that whatever is in there is an email address and is not some gibberish, right? And so value objects provide like a layer to say, hey, this will never change, it's immutable, this is validated, it's like the correct information, and it's always like type. You can always compare two of them together and get the same value as long as the underlying value is the same. And so this article kind of popped up because I don't know much about advanced usage, and so I'm curious to see what else there is to do. So this article is called Value Objects in PHP 8.0 Advanced Usage. It's by Christian Natashi. So introduction, in the previous article, we explored the power of value objects in improving code quality, system robustness, and minimizing the need for extensive validation. So again, that's what I'm saying, right? Those are the power you get from value objects is quality, system robustness, and minimizing the need for extensive validation, because all of the logic, or all the value objects are going to be validated for you. Okay, and so in this article, he says, when dealing with value objects, it's beneficial to classify them into different types based on their complexity. In my experience, I've identified three main types: simple value objects, complex value objects, and composite value objects. Okay, that makes sense, right? There could be a fourth, but it would be essentially a mix of these ones. Okay, so simple value object. So a simple value object encapsulates just a single value, which represents just a primitive value or basic concept within our domain. So these objects are ideal for straightforward attributes or measurements. Okay, so this is the example that he has here. Is he has an age class, and so you pass in a value that's an integer. He's keeping his properties in here, which is great, right? And then he's validating it. And so in the validation logic, he's saying if the value is, so if the value is greater than or equal to 0 or 18, right? So if he's less than 18, we're going to throw an adult required exception. So that kind of works, right? Or if it's less than, or if it's greater than 120, we're going to also throw like this person's too old, right? So it's saying we have to have an age between 18 and 120 essentially. And then there's a toString value, which is converting it into a value, which is really super helpful. And then there's also this equals function, so we can compare two age classes together. So that's like kind of the basics of what you want to see inside of a value object. And okay, so that's a simple value object, right? Simple integer. And then there's this toString method so that we can easily convert it back into a string. And he's going through saying it's like when you're creating a simple value object, consider the following guidelines: that there's a single responsibility, so this is only keeping track of the age. It's immutable. It's a read-only class, so we can't change it, which is great. It includes validation, and it has a string representation and a quality check. So those are the kind of things that we're going to want to make sure are in our value objects as we're creating them. Okay, so next example is a complex value object. And so this complex value object contains two properties as opposed to the single one that was in the age class, right? This is coordinates. And we're keeping track of latitude and longitude, and we're able to go in here and say, okay, latitude has to be between this range and longitude has to be in this range. Otherwise, it's an invalid value object and we can't use it, right? And then there's a cool thing where we're converting it to a string. And there's also something that says, like, are these two equal? So again, this is just like an extension of that simple value object, right? All we're doing is adding an additional like value property. So it's not significantly more complex. And then he has the same things again, right? Structured representation, validation, string representation, and then equality checks. So we're all good there. So again, like this is a great like thing to have. Like these, you might have a complex structure, right? Like I know, like if you have a like a currency, like if you're tracking money, like you always have to keep track of like the amount and the denomination, right? So it's a $5 US or it's €5. That way you have the ability to go, well, these are equivalent, right? $5 is equal to $5, but it's not equal to €5. Okay. Next one is a composite value object. And this is really cool. This is like really powerful. So what they're saying is you have multiple simple or complex value objects into another value object. It's a composite, right? So it's multiple pieces of it kind of combined together. So this example is an address. So in an address, you have a street. In an address, you have a street, a city, and a postal code. And because these are value objects, they can all have their own validation in them, right? So if street has some sort of business rules, that all exists there, right? And if it's a city, all that logic exists there. And if it's a postal code, it exists there, right? We don't have in this value object validation to make sure the street, city, and postal code are all valid, because those have all been taken care of by the individual value objects. So we can pass around an address and know that it's valid because each one of those components is valid. And then he does the same thing here. Like we're pushing, okay, we have an address and we're comparing it with the street is equal, the city is equal, the postal code is equal. So each one of those individual components has to be equal in order for the whole thing to be equal, which is really cool, right? Like we're really structuring, we're really using the class structure in order to minimize like code duplication. Okay. So it says in this example, the address composite value is a composite of street, city, and postal code, and each subobject can encapsulate just a single value. So together they form a more comprehensive representation of an address. It's pretty cool, right? ToString is providing a readable string representation, and equal compares the two address objects for equality. Okay, factory methods and private constructors. So in the examples we've presented so far, we've explored relatively simple value objects. However, everyday development introduces challenges when value objects have internal representation differing from their externals. So to illustrate this challenge, let's consider the date time concept. The date, the 24th of December 2023 at 4:09:53 p.m. Rome time zone can be represented in various ways, such as seconds since January 1st, or as in RFC 33339 string. Unlike languages like Java and C#, PHP lacks constructor overloading, which is a huge downside, but you can get around it. So what we're going to do is a factory method, which is a really cool design pattern to allow us to do like multiple constructors. So we employ one or more static methods, and it becomes invaluable for controlling object initialization. So let's take a look at this one. So we have a datetime value object, which has a datetime immutable as its property, right? Or as its attribute. So we're keeping track of the datetime inside of the class. And then they have this cool function now where this is the factory method where we're saying, okay, we're going to create something from a timestamp. So they have multiple methods here that allow us to create a datetime value object from one of these pieces. So we have the ability to create from a timestamp, which is just an integer, or we can create from an RFC 3339 string, which we can I scroll over on this? We can just pass that as a thing inside the datetime immutable. And then we can create from parts, right? This is really cool. So if we have int month, this is a really cool kind of structure too. If you deal with a lot of dates like I do, this is really beneficial to have like all these helper functions to say, here's some garbage that the user sent us. Please put it in a format that I can modify. And then we have, again, like, is it a valid time? Like, are the hours between this time and the minutes between this time? Right? Where's that at? Oh, it's just a static function. So that must be a check first, right? And we have now, which gives us a new version of this at the current time. And then we can convert it to get the date time directly, right? And so here's some examples down at the bottom. So we can create from a timestamp. So we have the numbers, like number of seconds since 1970, January 1st, 1970. This is the RFC version. And then we have the parts, including the time zone, and then just the now function. So, and the interesting thing about this, which I didn't talk about, is they have a private constructor. And so that means there's no way for us to directly create one of these value objects, right? So that's preventing access. That's preventing us from not using one of these factory methods, because only the functions inside the class can access the constructor. So that's what this is doing. This is a really cool way to prevent just like randomness from occurring with constructors. Okay. So, and they say in conclusion, they started talking about simple value objects where we just have like a single value, complex value objects, we have multiple properties, and then composite value objects where it's a value object of value objects, which is, again, really cool. We talked about this whole factory method and private constructors to provide helper functions in order to make value objects from kind of user inputs. Thank you all for watching today. This is hopefully will be interesting, and we'll see what other people subscribe to. If you have some feedback that you'd like to provide, or you are you want an article, there's an article you want to put in front of us, maybe we'll do it. We'll talk about one of your articles on the stream. You can drop it in at the PHP Developers TV subreddit. Just put it on there, and we'll take a look at it as soon as we can. Thank you, and have a good day.